So we're looking at anger. So if you don't have depression through aggressive nature of disappointment through a squash game, you might be on the opposite side of fury, rage, and anger. So I jokingly put it down as a topic, saying putting a lid on pure anger and caring, putting a lid on pure rage and caring through anger. And Dan said, yeah, let's talk about that today. So that is the segment of today. I will talk about my little pieces. I did a course. I feel like every time someone speaks about the past, I always reminded of Sheldon Cooper explaining physics to Penny and goes, back in 1988. And it's like, I don't want to know that. Just tell me what you learned from it.
Back in ancient Greece. Yeah.
So back in 2022, that sounds probably better than just back before Christmas. Back in 2022, I did a course, and it's basically learning about triggers and emotions and stuff like that, because I felt like it would be useful for me, as I felt like I was wrestling with understanding what my heart was saying to my body and head. As I'm a quite logical person, I knew something was happening subconsciously, so I thought I'd explore through doing a course, learning a bit more, and then sort of, sifting through my heart emotions to understand what might be going on deeper. And as I've been connecting my heart back to my body and bringing back connection, which sounds so lovely and amazing, I have connected rage back into my body. And I think it is an interesting one of, I guess it's dealing with disappointment, dealing with pain, dealing with difficulty. I think as a kid, I used to get angry quite a lot. People probably wouldn't know this because it's more internally, I'd feel it. But I know anger can look very ugly. It can be quite painful if it's done through punching people or yelling at someone. So I'd never tried to explode that anger or frustration onto people. A lot of the time I'd channel it into, I'd get frustrated that, let's say I've lost the ball against someone in football or hockey, and I'll basically chase them down and exert that anger through my legs, and class it as a new source of energy, which would feel amazing. But right at the moment, I've only just started to get back into sport. But before that, actually having anger and frustration that you don't have anywhere to go with it can be actually quite tough, because by looking at anger or frustration, then it sort of in its face, I think someone said it's a secondary emotion towards other things that's going down deeper. But I think when it feels like a ball of fury inside you, sometimes you can't look past that you're just angry because you're angry. And I think that's where sport for me was very handy to do sport. And then afterwards you would then simmer down to then realize, I was angry because actually there's been a buildup of ... like frustration at school or whatever. So we're talking about anger and how we deal with it. What's our thoughts on it? Trying to be caring, not only to others, but also to ourselves when we get angry. But yeah, so what's your thoughts on that?
I think, again, from this podcast that I was listening to yesterday, so it's basically I found the thing. So it's Feel Better, Live More, episode 275, how to become happier today. It's easier than you think, right? And one thing that jumped out to me is they were talking about happiness is a default position. When you are born, you are happy, and basically you cry because you are unhappy. And then your parent will resolve that issue to make you happy again. So that's your default position, is happiness. And you want to basically in life always kind of revert back or kind of come back to that state. When it comes to anger, anger is just literally pure energy. As Tom said, you can either use that energy to punch somebody in the face, or take a chunk out of the ground while playing golf, or change the world with it, right? It's a choice to do that. And I think, again, when it comes down to secondary emotions and things, there's typically this totem pole of personality traits. And what typically happens is, like, depending on where you are, is kind of like there's a split between the normal version of yourself and the shadow version of yourself, which means this shadow version is like when you're your worst version of yourself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people hit, like, let's say giving like an offensive joke, right? Somebody will like take the mick out of somebody as their like first position in the shadow self, and then hitting like physical outlash of something would be like the lowest of the low. So it is in there. It's just whether or not you get to it or not, depending on the level of like the worst version of yourself as a degree. Whereas some other people have your first level of shadow self is bang the table or something. Whereas they would never, ever think to say some like cutting remark about somebody, you know? And I find that fascinating that each of us have a different order, and it's kind of tied into Myers-Briggs and then looking at like shadow self. And I think it's something functions.
Cognitive,
can't remember the word.
Was it?
Can't remember. Something, yeah, I don't remember, but this like shadow version, whereas like what is like anger to you? Is anger like lashing, physical lashing out? Is that like very, very low? And if it's not, if it's like higher on the totem pole, like Tom said, it's like figuring out why. And I think a lot of the time, you typically push it down because there is no positive way, or you don't think there's a positive way, because people assume that fighting is the way to get out anger, right? Fighting in a physical sense, rather than fighting for example, you know, writing a piece of policy or writing an email to somebody, like from a legal perspective or a justice perspective or a fairness perspective. And I think it's interesting when you think about, cool, I feel angry. Sometimes you feel angry because of an injustice or an unfairness. And actually that is a good quality, and it just comes out as then anger. Whereas really it's like, oh, I love fairness. I hate double standards, and I love the stability of that. So then you can be like, cool, I don't need to be annoyed that I'm like angry all the time. I can be like, oh, I'm angry because I value fairness. So if you can kind of go past that initial piece of energy to be like the emotional thing or the principle behind that energy, it's more like reassuring that that's the case. And then you can start working with it and reckoning with it to be like, cool, if I value fairness, then maybe I should just speak up for people more. When I see something happening, maybe I should speak up more. Or if it's happening to me, if somebody's bullying me at work, maybe I should like speak up and like not allow that to happen because I value fairness, rather than just angry and have that energy that then doesn't go anywhere or isn't utilized and ultimately pushed down and then rears its head because you go into your shadow self and you use that anger on, or use that energy on somebody that doesn't deserve that to happen to them. You know, so I find that a really fascinating observation. Yeah.
I think it's reminded me of a social post I saw this week, and it was basically something that Gary Vee's done is V Friends, and he's created different characters. And one of them is a decisive duck. And basically the point of this duck is a little cartoon. And the point is, do a decision and then you live with it. You either learn that you've done something bad to then take it on to your future, or you learn that you did something good, amazing, you can celebrate it. But actually by not doing a decision, you're stuck in this sort of limbo world. And I think so easily, I don't know if it's Christian background or British background or whatever, is when sometimes you've got anger, you've either got people that are lashing it out, headbutting people, kicking people, element, extremism, and then you've got the bottling element, and it's like you don't need to go to the full extreme, but it's like, what could an action be, and be decisive in it, that it might not be the best decision, but you can basically forgive afterwards, say sorry, learn about the other person or learn about yourself. And sometimes it is just going, actually, I'm going to try and do this a bit different, because actually sometimes you carry that weight of, oh, I didn't do anything, and I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and now I've got shame, now I've got guilt. And then you feel even heavier going into seeing that person, being in that situation the following day, and it just gets bigger and bigger, rather than just having a light account with people. It's sort of balancing having a balance sheet, but for your mental and emotions, like you would finances, and it's recognizing, that you can just level yourself out, not only through positive nature, but actually what does it look like dealing with the negative side, because that's just as positive than just getting stuck and staying in the positive nature, because we can't always do that. I think life is a roller coaster, you'll have both. So it's learning with coping mechanisms of how do you deal with both. Actually, we're living through different forms of crisis. So we might be on the spectrum of being in the negative and might be more frustrated and more angry than ever. But it's like, okay, what does that look like for my personal life, my friends, my family, my community, the people I connect with, maybe online, further afield, or globally. And it's just, seeing what works and fleshing it out. I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring it out. I know I've got a pull-up bar and I do a lot more press-ups. So sometimes if I get angry, doing something physical massively helps me. Plus it keeps me healthy, and it means that I can focus my anger into pushing or lifting myself. So then I actually gain from it in the long run. But
yeah, ultimately, if we frame anger as energy, then how are you dissipating that energy, aka using that energy out so it doesn't get stored up and build up in this sense of pressure? So is it the press ups? Is it talking to somebody and venting to be like, this situation really annoyed me and angered me? And then also relive, kind of like going past the energy to be like, what's the emotion? Is it because you really value fairness or like justice? And you hate double standards or whatever that kind of like backwards kind of like emotion is that results in that anger.